Hello, and welcome to the Husband Help Haven podcast, where you're going to learn how to be the best husband that you can be, no matter what your marriage is like right now. This is Stephen, and today we are going to be continuing our series of lessons that I've learned about marriage from my time coaching men through separation over the past 10 plus years. Now, last episode we talked about the lie that you've heard about your marriage problems and how cyclical marriage problems that feel the same across time and across different issues are proof that you should leave your marriage. We attacked that lie with the power of commitment and a right understanding of what self-improvement looks like. But I think if we're being honest, the reality is that 70% of divorces are initiated by the wife. This is still the modern stat that we have to go by, and so I recognize that episode really probably needed to be heard more by wives than by husbands. However, today's episode is also going to be about a sort of wrong way of thinking that can get you into trouble inside of your marriage relationship. And it's especially relevant, actually, in reconciliations. This is where I see this come up the most often with my own clients, is in this can sort of end up being a pebble in your shoe, a problem, an obstacle to good, conclusive reconciliation. And so what is this thing that we're going to be talking about today? It is keeping your shoulds in their proper place, or to put it in another way, really getting clear with yourself about the difference between a should and a must. Okay, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And specifically, I want to encourage all husbands and all fathers out there to be very mindful of the shoulds that you impose on your wife and family. And especially, I want you to be mindful about turning your shoulds into musts. Okay? And if this is a very easy mistake to make, this is something I myself have done in my own relationship. And it's something, like I said, that I see my clients do as well. And just again, to give you the answer right up front, it's going to be this, first off, there is this sort of self-awareness component, and we're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you some examples in this episode of exactly what I'm talking about and where I've seen this cause some trouble. But really the answer to all of this is to be more willing to consider unconventional approaches to getting what you want in these most intimate relationships. And so what we're going to talk about today is going to be how to sort of get at the core desire that you have behind these shoulds that you are perhaps inadvertently bringing to your relationships, and perhaps how to find unconventional ways of getting those core needs met without the problems that come when you're not getting the buy-in from your wife or from your kids or whatever about the way that you want things to be done. So just real quick, guys, remember, you can go to husbandhelphaven.com/episode-28 to see the overview for this episode. I've been pretty diligent about putting up not just like little detailed, notes, but I actually have the quotes. I have a description of the episode, a whole, overview of the episode, everything. So go check that out if you want, or if you want to download the MP3 or whatever. But just to continue going here. Okay. Let's clarify our terms a little bit. When I say should and when I say must, what am I talking about? Well, let me give you an example of a should that comes up a lot here at Husband Help Haven. And that is, my wife should work on the marriage. She should work on the marriage. Or here's another one that kind of gets applied in retrospect is, my wife should have given me a clear second chance to work on things, to save my marriage. She should have told me before she left. Okay? So we're starting to see here, what are we saying here? We're saying this is something that ought to have happened differently than how it did, or ought to be happening differently than it is. I think there's plenty of examples you could probably find outside of separation as well. For example, my wife should go to church with me. My wife should manage her schedule in a certain way. My wife should be more proficient at insert whatever domestic duty or whatever responsibility that you see her sort of not doing well enough at. My wife should communicate with me in a certain way. My wife should be nicer to me, complain less. My wife should get a counselor. Go get some help. Now, what you're going to notice as I sort of go through this list is that all of these shoulds are are maybe good things. They might be true. It may be objectively true that your wife is failing to meet a certain standard or has failed to meet a certain standard that, if met, would make the relationship better or make the family better. And yet, when you get caught up on these shoulds, it often ends up making the relationship worse or making the family worse. And why? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. First off, it can end up sort of pushing you to put pressure on things that don't need pressure or that aren't answered best by pressure. I think it does end up thinking this way, does end up enabling controlling behavior. I think it also enables self-justification because you might have this list of things that your wife should do or should not have done or should have done or whatever. And this list is going to be the thing that you put your attention on rather than the things that you should do or should have done. And I guarantee you, my friend, that there are shoulds that you have not met in your relationship as well. So please hear me when I say this all the same. I'm not saying that you should never have any shoulds in your relationship. It's just that we should treat our shoulds differently than we treat our musts, okay? And so I'm not trying to get us to abolish the word should from our vocabulary or even abolish having standards in your marriage or in your family. I'm simply saying we must keep them in their proper place, okay? Because again, these shoulds are so easily used as weapons or instruments of self-justification, and it prevents you a lot of times when you're caught up on the should of what your wife should have done or should not be doing. It prohibits you or inhibits you rather from understanding your wife's perspective or her struggles, because I guarantee you somewhere in there on her end, she's thinking why she should do this thing or it should be done this way or why she can't help but do it this way or whatever. And additionally, I'll say a lot of times when we have this sort of script of things that your wife should do, it blinds you to better solutions. There probably are other ways of accomplishing the core goal that you have behind that should that might actually work better for your unique circumstances, for the unique personalities shared between you and your wife. There is more than one way to skin a cat, as the proverb goes. There is another path. In a lot of these situations, there's another path that fulfills the core desire and increases connection as you do so. And so we should be alert to that. We should be looking out for that. And we should be hesitant to put pressure on our wives about these things. And we should recognize that when we press on these shoulds, whether it's a good should or a bad should or a true should or a false should, it does, as a cost of pressing on that, highlight misalignment in the relationship. Again, in separation, we're trying to find alignment, not misalignment. And the reality is, this is just facts here, is that most relationships, most marriages end up finding some sort of unconventional way of doing things for them that just plain works better. And that's okay. You sort of have the universal set of standards for what a good marriage looks like, and perhaps a universal set of boundaries as well. All right. And we can talk about that. But most marriages, at least at some times or another, are going to need to fudge a little bit on the shoulds, lower the bar here, raise the bar there, in a way that's different than how everybody else does it, and that's okay. Now, guys, let me pause. Quick sort of self-promotional shout out here, guys. I do want to just voice a word about Husband Help Group. It is coming soon. If you are interested, go on over to husbandhelphaven.com/waitlist to learn a little bit more. In a few weeks, I will be opening doors just to the waitlist to get an early group of founders into the group. We've already had some, former students that are in there sort of greasing the grooves a little bit for us. If you're interested, go check out the waitlist. There's more information on that page about what exactly the support group is, what exactly this group is going to be like. But I'd love to see you on the waitlist there. Now, continuing on, guys, let's talk about learning to recognize shoulds. You can't fix what you don't know. You can't, awareness is the key to fixing any problem, the first step to fixing any problem. That's why I say this all the time in calls with my clients is, you know, there's a reason that the first step of the 12 steps in AA is acknowledging that you're an alcoholic. And that is because you can't fix the problem that you don't know exists. Okay. So, let's learn to recognize these shoulds here. How can you catch yourself when you impose an arbitrary should, or a should that doesn't need to be there? And maybe just really quick before we even get into that, let's talk about shoulds and musts. Let's swap those two words out for different terms, a little bit more technical terms of standards and boundaries, which is how I like to think of these things. Standards are the bar that you set for your relationship. It's the bar that you're trying to meet in your relationship or just with yourself. Boundaries is the line you won't cross. You might think of it as the ceiling and the floor, right? If the bar is up here, this is what we want to live up to. There's the line you don't cross down here. This is where we cannot tolerate. The relationship can't function if this line is crossed. And of course, there's a distance between standards and boundaries. So there is this gray area. And a lot of times, that's where our shoulds get us into trouble, is when the bar is not being met, but the line isn't being crossed either. And so then we can sort of live by these shoulds, live by the unmet bar, and it actually ends up being counterproductive. All right. So let's go through a couple examples, and I think this will help you understand kind of what I'm getting at with this episode. So here's an example that comes up all the time. My wife should go to counseling and get some help to sort her issues. Now, a lot of times, this is true. You're right. If she were to do that, if she would go get some counseling, go get some professional help, she would be happier. She would be healthier. Life would go better for her. But if that's just plain not going to happen, then dwelling on this or harping on this is not going to be helpful. And so it's instead helpful to step back and ask yourself, well, what's the thing that you want here? What's the actual, what is the counseling and the professional help a means to accomplish? Well, what you want is you want her to heal. What you want is you want her to develop self-awareness. You want her to introspect herself, right? And what can end up happening, though, is that you can sort of put the cart before the horse by saying, my wife should go to counseling, my wife should go get help. This becomes the only path to meet that underlying need, when actually there are other ways for her to get healing and find introspection. And while counseling is a great solution for those things, it's not the only way of finding those things. And it is also possible to start out finding those things outside of counseling or outside of professional help, taking those sort of first steps of healing or those first steps of introspection independently or through more casual means. And then you can sort of segue that into the professional help. So in this case, a lot of the times I'm sort of guiding my clients to sort of let go of what you can't control, give your wife permission to be slow in addressing her own issues, and look for other avenues of enhancing the peace and healing available in your relationship. Instead of both internally and externally, because sometimes the guys, this isn't even something that they're bringing up with their wife, but just internally, there's this monologue of, she needs to be in counseling. She should be in counseling. It would be so much better if she would just go to counseling the way that she should. And again, that is the part that can become unhelpful to you as much as to her, because you're living in that one-track way of thinking as well. And again, ask yourself, what's the thing that the counseling actually does? What is the goal you're actually trying to meet? Okay, healing and introspection, probably. Some variation of those things. Are there other ways we can find that? Are there other ways I can try to lead the way in that now without counseling? And then you can still mention it every now and then. Again, we're not trying to abandon the should. We're not abandoning the standard. And again, it may very well be counseling is a good thing for her. But What you don't want her or you to feel like is that this should of you should go to counseling is a cure-all. Because actually that cuts both ways. Because when she goes to counseling and it's not the cure-all that you've made it out to be, one or two or both things can happen. First off, she can get discouraged because she goes into counseling. Maybe she doesn't get a good counselor the first time around or whatever, or the counselor takes a different direction than you were thinking they would take. And it ends up making her feel worse, at least temporarily. So that is not an uncommon thing at all to have happen. Sometimes in counseling, you got to rip off the Band-Aid and it hurts at first. And so if you're going in saying, oh, I should be in counseling. If I go into counseling, it's going to solve all my problems, speaking from the wife's perspective. And then you get in there and the counselor doesn't solve all the problems. It sort of leaves you with more questions than answers initially. Then guess what? You're going to feel like discouraged on the one hand, but you're also going to feel like, as the wife who's sort of gone at the behest of the husband saying you should go to counseling, that you've been sold a false bill of goods. It's not solved the problem that you were making it out like it was going to solve. Additionally, for you, as the person saying this should, it can be equally disappointing, equally frustrating. Gosh, I guess she's just not fixable then. I guess she really is stuck. I guess she's just determined to be difficult. Whatever. We can hedge against both. We want to hedge against both of those things there by bringing the should more into its proper place. It's a good thing to do. It's not a cure-all, right? Okay, so there you go. We sort of beat that example to death. Let's go to another one. This one comes up. I talked about how this comes up in reconciliation a lot. This example specifically, I've seen probably like 10 times just in the past year. I've seen this come up. What is it? My wife should talk to me about her affair and apologize for the damage that it's done before we reconcile. It's sort of a variation. That one that I just mentioned about should go to counseling, that's another one that I will run into through the sort of on the journey of reconciliation a lot, is like, my wife should come to me and commit to working on the marriage before we do XYZ thing. Sometimes we won't be intimate until my wife has agreed that we're going to work on the marriage, something like this. This is another very common one. My wife should talk to me about her affair. She should apologize for the damage it's done. And sort of the implication is before anything else happens, any positive thing in the relationship happens, it's not going to happen until she does this. Now, this one is a bit of a delicate one because, I mean, really, you're allowed to make that into a must. It's just that for most men, it's not actually a must. It's a should, but it gets treated like a must. And here we have the point of today's episode. Because you're right, okay? This is, undeniably, this is something that needs to happen. Having this conversation is good for both you and your wife. If there has been infidelity, if she's had an affair, whether emotional or physical, then trust is restored in the relationship by airing it out in the open, by bringing it out, by talking through it as each person needs, especially the person who's been betrayed. It's okay to need that. And so this is something that does need to happen. And yet, a lot of times guys will get the order wrong. They put this should too early in the timeline. Because at least in my experience, from what I've observed, a lot of times this conversation where we sort of finally have the sober-minded talk about where she's able to sort of take ownership of how she got into the affair, sort of what bad habits or bad thoughts she was entertaining to grow in herself to get there, and sort of take full ownership and all this stuff, and ask for forgiveness. A lot of times that conversation is the thing that seals the healing, not initiates it, not starts it. And so again, this can be a must for you. You can say, as the person who's been betrayed, it is on your wife to meet your boundaries and your needs to be able to initiate healing. So you could say, I can't participate in this relationship with you anymore. I'm still going to stay married to you. I still want to be married to you, but I cannot participate in the relationship until you come and talk to me about what went wrong in this affair. You can have that as the line if you want. But a lot of times when I'm talking through this with my clients and I say, well, okay, let me just paint you a picture. Imagine that you just continue sort of letting things unfold naturally with your wife and things continue to get better between the two of you. and you feel connection growing, and you feel like she's doing things that are keeping you safe and are not causing increased or continued suspicion. She's letting you look at her phone. She's, keeping her, not being secretive. She's not doing those sort of red flag behaviors. And so felt safety is improving in the relationship. You feel like okay trusting her. You don't feel like actively in danger that she's going to go out and have an affair again. And I say, okay, so if all that were happening, would you be okay then waiting to have this conversation? Would you be able to just continue like that for a while? And I can't think of an instance where the answer has been no. Every time the answer has been, well, yeah, if that's how things were, I could wait to have this conversation. We could keep going a little bit and then have the conversation a little bit down the road. Okay, so then right there, we have just found where we have mistaken a should for a must. Because the thing you actually wanted was to feel safe in the relationship. You wanted assurance that she's not going to have an affair again. And you want assurance that she actually enjoys being there with you in this relationship. She's doing it of her own volition, not out of obligation. But there's other ways to get those things than the conversation. The conversation, a lot of times, is as much about justice as it is about healing. And a lot of times we can set aside the need for justice, use forgiveness for that part, at least for now, and just take the healing part, which can be accomplished through connection, positive time together, and a few minor changes in behavior to increase trust. So, okay, when we step back, then we can say, it's actually okay for things to happen in a different order. It's okay for us to rebuild a foundation of connection in our relationship first, to get to where we enjoy each other, to get to where we trust each other, for her to sort of have her own time to process through these things in a relationship that feels good, so she can sort of think with hindsight about what happened in the affair now that she's in a better headspace. And then we can have a productive conversation. And it's okay for that to even become a must at some point, or for it to just remain a should that we meet later, right? It just doesn't have to be before everything else. And that's the mistake. So, okay, there we go. Another good example. Let's just go through a couple other ones really quick. My wife should talk to me about why she left. Another one that comes up all the time. And I say to this, yes, you might be right. And if things were fair, if she were operating in good faith, she would do that. But things aren't fair, and she's not. So in this case, this isn't as much about something that you're trying to change in your relationship or anything out here. Rather, by letting go of the should, it actually helps you. Because when you focus on that should, she should have talked to me about it. She should have let me know. She should have given me a warning. She should have given me a second chance. All those things might be true. But by focusing on the should, you're fostering antagonism in your relationship. And the irony is, if you were willing to remove all of those expectations and sort of so that your own temperature about it died down a little bit and you weren't running so hot on her failure to do that, and engage with her as she is and where she is with no should in place whatsoever, you may actually find she's more willing to have that conversation. And a lot of times when you are dug in on that should, on what she should have done differently to prevent separation, it keeps you guys apart, facing different directions, or doing this, we're opposed to each other, right? We're opposite each other. She's saying, I should have done it this way. You're saying she shouldn't have done it this way. Well, when you can sort of meet her and say, I accept that you did do it this way, and I trust that you had reasons for doing it this way. Even if I wouldn't have agreed with the reasons, even if they weren't good reasons or healthy reasons, I understand there were reasons. And so, okay, well, a lot of times when we take the pressure off that way, what you're going to find is we're finding alignment, and where there's alignment, there's dialogue. Okay, so that's another good one where it's letting go of the should isn't as much about what it changes in your relationship, but it does change your inner life. Let go of that should. Another one sort of along the same lines of the first one that I shared, my wife should say yes to more reconnection ideas. My wife we're in reconciliation. My wife should be working on the marriage more than she is. We're reconciling. She's told me she wants to stay together, and yet it doesn't feel like she's working on the marriage. Okay. In this case, I can again virtually guarantee you that where this should is coming in, it's blinding you to the other avenues that are available to reconnect. Um, it may be, just to go to classic love language example, you're familiar with the 5 love languages, okay? It may be that you're looking for quality time and insisting that quality time together is going to be the thing that brings the most healing and the most improvement to your relationship, when the reality is your wife would respond much better to just simple words of affirmation or acts of service or something like this, right? You can go look up love languages if you have no idea what I'm talking about. The point is, again, very similar to the first example. Okay, we want her to go to counseling, same sort of thing. We want her to just work on the relationship, whatever that means. But if we sort of step back and say, well, what is the thing that we actually want here? Why do I think this should happen? It's because you just want anything intentional you want intentionality towards the relationship. And so I'll have guys who have been like, look, I have picked out this marriage retreat for my wife and I to go to, and I just don't know. I don't think she's going to do it. She's not doing it, but we should be able to do this because we said we're working on the marriage. Or same thing, like we should go to couples counseling together because we said we were working on the marriage, but she just won't go. And again, classic situation where I can say, well, hold on, let's just back up. What's the thing that we actually want here? We just want to do something together that builds up or enriches the relationship. But there's many other things that can tick that same box than just a marriage retreat or just couples counseling. And we can even still keep those as eventual sort of end goals. But hey, maybe we just read a book together. Maybe we just go get coffee together once a week and just have that little bit of intentional time together. Get comfortable with that. And then we can go to these other bigger pursuits. So again, you're starting to see the what I'm advocating for here. When you feel these shoulds creep in, the very first thing that I want you to train yourself to do is to step back and say, why do I think this should happen? We want to extract the actual thing that we want. What is that core thing? What is that belief that you are sort of enabling with that should? And then once we've done that, once we've pulled out the why, we challenge the ego. We say, have you made this should a bigger deal than it ought to be? Have you turned this should, this standard, into a must, a boundary? Is there a better way? We can ask that about the why too. Okay, why do I want this thing? Okay, in the example of healing, I want her to have healing and introspection. That's why I want her to go to counseling. Okay, but is there a better way, or a way that works right now, that meets her where she is better right now? And again, a lot of times you will find that there's a sort of unconventional way of meeting that goal that actually works better for the two of you, at least where you're at right now. So, okay, this is my hope, is that after listening to this, that all of us, myself included, I need to do this as well, can get better at differentiating between the shoulds and the musts. That's really what I would like. I would love for just us as men to be better at this, because I do think that we are more guilty of getting hung up on the shoulds than our female counterparts. My humble opinion, okay? So let me just reiterate, let's just recap what we've talked through so far. You're allowed to have a must. We will talk about boundaries at some point. I said that in the last episode. We will talk about boundaries at some point. But again, we've kind of talked about it a little bit here, which is really just, in a lot of ways, it comes down to delineation or having the right distinction. Knowing the difference between standards and boundaries. Those are two different things. Don't treat them as the same thing. Most people, I mean, men certainly do this. Women certainly do this part too, where we mindlessly lump standards and boundaries together. We lump our shoulds and our musts together to the detriment of those shoulds and musts and the destruction of the marriage. And let me just say this too, just as a quick little aside. I've talked a lot about, in this episode, we've been all talking about don't let your shoulds turn into musts, right? Don't let your standards turn into boundaries. Well, I think that the reverse can be dangerous too. And if you are conflict avoidant, if you fail to express yourself in your relationship, the other danger might actually be more present for you, where you have things that really are musts They are sort of lines on the ground for you, lines in the sand for you. And yet, because you don't want to bring any conflict, you treat it as a should, and you just make do with that without that must. Again, so uh, there is some danger there. I think it's a little bit less relevant, especially in reconciliation, especially in separation. But it is there, and it is something that people struggle with. Honestly, I would probably struggle with that myself. If I were to pick which side of the coin, I would probably struggle with more with that one, because that's me. I am the conflict avoidant type. That's what I have to work on in my relationship. So again, we really the end goal is clarity. We want to keep the shoulds in their proper place. We want to keep the musts in their proper place. These shoulds should be treated as good ideas, good starting points. They are indications of what your desires are in your relationship, but they can also guide you to deeper self-awareness, and they can support a broader vision of what you want in your marriage. Okay, so again, shoulds are not bad. They are not bad things to have. It's just we want to keep them in their proper place. And so again, here's my hope. When you find yourself thinking that your wife should do something, or she should have done something, or she should not do something, pause and ask yourself, why? Does it really matter? Does it matter now? Does the order matter? Is there another way that the core need behind that should could get met? If so, what is it? And how can you incentivize it without directly demanding it, right? All those questions, I think, will be helpful questions for you to ask. And ultimately, my goal in all of this is just to increase your flexibility. That's my ultimate goal. I want myself to be more humble, to be more introspective, to be more creative in the ways that they try to improve their marriage, that I try to improve my marriage, right? That I want to have a creative mind when it comes to attaining the best possible marriage between my wife and I. And that's going to mean striking to the core of the things that I think should happen or should not happen in my relationship, pulling out the why, and getting creative about accomplishing those whys. It is my experience, both as a coach and in my own marriage, that having the ability to do at least sometimes in some areas, to accept the unconventional, having that ability to be flexible, to willingly adjusting my standards a little bit here or there, or at least temporarily, to take more initiative, to do the thing that I want done myself. All of these things actually end up cultivating more connection, more peace, and here's the crazy part, more satisfaction in life and in my marriage. And I think the same will happen in your life and in your marriage, for both myself and my wife. And I think for both you and your wife, or the other people that you're in a relationship with. When you can get humble and get flexible, it's a good thing. Okay, where to from here, guys? Well, first off, like I said at the start, if you wish that you had a group of men that you could lean on during this time in your marriage, who are going through the same sort of thing as you, who are also committed to the sort of ethical backbone that we've established here at Husband Help Haven, pro-marriage, pro-wife, pro-hope, then come and check out Husband Help Group. It's going to be a great place for you. You can join the waitlist at husbandhelphaven.com/waitlist. If you want to learn more about what we talked about here on this episode, or if you just want a refresher, go over to husbandhelphaven.com/episode 27 with a dash, episode -27. And then guys, next time we are going to be back. We're going to continue this series of learnings from my time coaching men through separation. And we are going to talk about one of the most common tension points between men and women that I've seen cause a lot of relationship dissatisfaction. And so let me tell you this, if your wife has ever said to you that you need to be more validating, all right, if you've ever heard that from your wife, you never validate me, you need to be more validating, then come back next time. This will be the episode for you. We are going to dive deep on sort of the baseline issue beneath that and a very simple 3-word switch that you can sort of put into your mind to help you accomplish this need of hers. So stay tuned for that. We'll be back next time. Until then, thank you for listening. It has been Stephen coming at you with much manly love.